What's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, I gotta say, I miss the in-person pods. Do you want to just move back to Orlando and we can just record right here in my office? You could sit on the couch right here. We could just do this in person like we were doing in Atlanta.
Listen, if anything, you got to come to Atlanta, right? We got used to the sights and the sounds of downtown Atlanta. There are seasons here. You know, it's a great place to be. The CFB Hall is here.
I like Atlanta. We were watching Lottery Dream Home last night, season 18 premiere. And David was saying he had never been to Atlanta until like for an episode, at least until this season premiere was in Atlanta. And I was saying to Lauren, oh yeah, I was literally right there last week. Oh yeah, I was right there last week. Oh yeah, I know somebody that lives right there. Shout out Buckhead. All my friends, Candler, mainly the person I know most and associate with Buckhead. But there are a lot of things about Atlanta that I love. Also, a lot of things about Orlando that I love. Look, we've spent a lot of time in both places. I just feel like, you know, if you move back to Orlando, just make life a little bit easier. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. I'm actually going out there. We'll probably hang out in a couple weeks. But yeah, man, it was a super fun trip of media days, man. I love seeing you in person.
You're gonna be here in a couple weeks? I didn't know that.
Yeah, man. I'm going down there to some doctor's office thing my mom wants me to do. She's all like homeopathic medicine. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So she's like, go get checked out by my witch doctor. I'm like, let's do it. So I'll report back. We'll if I get superpowers, you'll be the first to know.
Sweet. All right. Yes, definitely keep the people updated on that. Great pod coming up. We are going to play out what chalk would look like in the SEC for the 2025 season because we have the order of finish predicted by the media. We have preseason all SEC, all that stuff came down. I had said last week, I think it comes out usually on Monday. It came out on Friday. So for those who were a bit surprised by that, per my expectation of when it was going to be coming out, you're welcome. I guess you got a nice little surprise on Friday. So we will talk about that. And we're going to have our annual in-person chat with Jordan Rodgers, Lad of the Week as well. A lot of people that we're going to be talking about in Lad of the Week. It was a loaded week for that. But first, as we always do, got to talk to you about our friends over at Dabble, which right now, if you are looking to get in on all of the things happening Major League Baseball with home run props and stuff like that, Dabble is a great place to be able to do that. It is one of the newest and best apps in the daily fantasy space, and they've wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none, and they offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, including NBA when that's happening. We've got MLB. We're going to have college football really, really soon. Use the promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. All right, well, I wanted to do this because chalk is usually considered a very negative thing. And chalk in college football is not. It actually is not in a lot of cases. And maybe some of this has to do with the fact that Nick Saban is no longer running the sport and chalk isn't just Bama running off to another title and facing Clemson in a national championship game. And so chalk in a modern sense can mean a lot of different things. But we've never done anything like this after the order of finish came out and the preseason all SEC team. So I figured this would be a good chance to be able to kind of just play this out and talk about what these storylines would mean. And funny enough, I started this exercise this morning by going to the SEC website to make sure that I had all this information, you know, order finish correct and all that stuff. If you look this up right now, it's the image of Arch at the podium and boom, Connor and Will prominently.
The
right
faces
there.
of SEC football. Many are saying, you know, the USA Today said we need some people to represent this conference. It's you looking prepped to answer a question. It's me looking constipated on a little cell phone device. It's great. I think it's a great representation of who we are.
I think he's actually answering my question the way that he's looking at me, which is, I don't want this. And I'm saying this is like, oh, it's cool to see yourself in something
You're
like
they
that.
made me too handsome. We got to fix it. Hold on.
No. Here's why it's bad, Will. Because when this gets just old takes exposed and people look back on the SEC media predictions, which we are always wrong because that's just the nature of the beast, they're just going to see us. And they're not going to look at Arch and think, oh, you know what? Yeah, Arch, he was the one who was wrong. No. This is a story about media predictions. We are representing the thing that is wrong. So we are going to look more wrong than anybody else when people look back on this.
I can
Not
see
good.
the end of the 90s movie where it like has the black and white photo and it just has you and it's like Connor predicted this player to be on the first team. He didn't get 4 snaps this season.
Yeah, he ended up actually getting benched in the
Yeah.
first quarter of a game, and it didn't really work out too well for this guy. So that's going to be just a tough pill that we're going to have to swallow. Nobody's going to look at what we had to say in the preseason and say, "Oh, those guys, they were onto something. They knew exactly what they were talking about." Go figure, though, that I'm actually someone who argued against Arch as a preseason All SEC quarterback. He ends up getting third team honors. And even though I'm high on Texas, I say Texas as the number one team in the country to start off. I think they have earned that. I still don't even have Texas making the SEC championship, much less winning it like the media predicted. So it's all up for interpretation how that's going to be received.
Mm-hmm.
By now, people probably, if you're listening to this, you already have a good idea of what this is. So we're not going to go through like every guy that made preseason All SEC or whatnot. But just in case you need a little bit of a refresher, you don't want to pull this up as we're going along. I will go through the media's predicted order of finish here. Let's start in reverse and do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
16 Mississippi State, 15 Kentucky, 14 Arkansas, 13 Vandy, 12 Mizzou, 11 Auburn, 10 Oklahoma, 9 Tennessee, 8 Texas A&M, 7 Ole Miss, 6 Florida, 5 South Carolina, 4 LSU, 3 Alabama, 2 Georgia, and 1 Texas. First time that the media didn't predict Alabama or Georgia to win the SEC since 2015, when the media, which I was not a part of the SEC media at that specific time, the media picked Auburn to win the SEC championship, and we know how that turned out. Chalk did not play out that year, unless you consider Gus Malzahn underdeveloping a very talented quarterback to be Chalk, in which case I guess Chalk did play out 2015.
Actually, yeah, that was the most Gus Malzahn year. And Gus Malzahn is like the ops for expectations. Every time that Gus Malzahn has any type of expectation within a season, within a game, within a player, whatever it would be, he does the exact opposite. So we should have known back then, everyone thinks Auburn's going to have a normal one. They never have a normal one.
No. So Texas is new in that regard, and that it's a very unique pick to win the SEC championship. And I can't remember who I was talking about. Somebody at Media Days brought this to my attention, and I'm blanking, so I apologize. I usually like to credit people that put me on to certain pieces of information. But if Chalk plays out and if Texas wins the SEC, Texas would be the first new SEC team to win the conference as in a non-founding member of the SEC, which there are 6 of them now: South Carolina, Arkansas, Mizzou, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Texas, none of whom have ever won a conference title. So interesting in that we could be talking about a very new face of the SEC by season's end. Don't tell Rhett Lashley that this could be a new SEC team winning the conference title after he pointed out that the SEC only had 6 teams who have won the conference since 1964. And that's a sign that depth is not there in the SEC. I don't know how that all of a sudden gives the ACC a New Year's 6 bowl win in the 2020s. But okay.
That's the cool thing about talking season. We've gotten to a point where we just all get our own alternative news sources and we can just make things up. Like we're having the amount of depth in the SEC conversations I'm having that feel insane to me is just not to even go off on that thing, but like I'm hearing people talk and use words in the English language and I'm like, do you hear yourself, dog?
I love talking season. I love it. I absolutely do. I'm getting to the end of it.
Well, because the whole narrative now is just like, well, the SEC is poor. Now that we can pay athletes, they're all washed. And it's like we already are poor. We were bored of this in like March of this year.
Texas, poor.
Right. Yeah.
Georgia.
I will. Let me be a boomer and complain about one more thing, though. I'm starting to get why people don't like Texas. I actually like Texas as far as their brand. I like Arch. Like I have a lot of reasons that I like Texas that a lot of people probably can't relate to. But I feel like them kind of showing up and immediately getting crowned. And also, like, we were doing an interview during the presentation about the D-line shifts that was just very kind of like a lot of the examples went back to Texas, Georgia. I was like, it just feels like everyone is ready to just anoint Texas after, again, I had a great SEC regular season. But if I was a Georgia fan, hold on now.
Fair. Very fair. But here's the good news. If you're a Georgia fan with this Texas prediction, the predicted SEC champion has started as the number one team in the AP poll each of the last 4 seasons, including 2 of which were Georgia. And then that was also the case 7 out of the last 9 seasons. So it's kind of, hey, this is the preamble to being the preseason number one team in college football. You know where I'm going with this. Texas could now start off as the number one team in America. And the wild thought, and I always bring up the stat about how in the last 20 years, 19 of those 20 teams failed to win a national championship after they were preseason number one, the lone exception being 2017 Alabama. That team, 2017 Alabama, didn't even make it to the SEC championship.
Yeah, they had a normal one too. Yeah, they spawned a whole maybe playoff expansions here because of that team.
Perhaps. So if you think about it from that, we've never seen all 4 of these boxes checked since the SEC championship became a thing in 1992. Preseason pick to win the SEC, preseason number one in the AP poll, reach the SEC championship, and win the national championship. Nobody has accomplished all 4 of those things in the same season. And that is good news if you're a non-Texas fan to hear that and go, that might be a difficult thing for them to do all of those things. And we could still have everything in front of us because obviously this is usually not the way that this works. I realize Texas has only checked one of those boxes. Who knows? Maybe Penn State, maybe Clemson. It could be preseason number one. TBD on that. We'll have much more discussion on that. But on FanDuel, which is just, odds and not necessarily a prediction, those are 2 different things. Texas is the SEC favorite and the national title favorite. And by the way, Arch is the preseason Heisman Trophy favorite. And if Chalk plays out in his year 1 as a starter, he'll be in line to have a better season than Peyton in 97, Eli in 03, Archie in 69. He was better in 69 than 70. 70 was a little bit more of the, he didn't win the Heisman, but he finished higher in the Heisman voting. If you kind of look back at some of the numbers.
Call him out, Connor.
Yeah, look, we're Archie Manning's resume got me to curse on this podcast once, so we won't go down that road again. But you kind of get what I'm saying. The irony that is just loaded with this Texas pick in the preseason is that Texas is actually the team that started this trend back in 2005. I always say 2005 was when all of this began because Texas prevented USC from the three-peat. Our friends Gene Chizik, Jamal Charles, they had a certain part in doing that. That team started off number 2 in the AP poll. Teams ranked number 2 through 5 in the preseason AP poll won 15 of the last 20 national championships. That's where you want to be. Texas has never, ever, ever, ever been the preseason number 1 team in the AP poll since they started doing a preseason poll back in 1950, the Harry Truman administration. Think about that. Isn't that wild?
Give that stat again for the people at home. I'm sorry, what?
Texas has never been the preseason number 1 team in the AP poll since that became a thing back in 1950. Preseason number 2 a handful of times. Never preseason number 1.
That's one of those things that it's like it flies in the face of the reality that we feel like we know, right? Because we know these Texas teams always started high and like falling down. But I gotta say, like, that's actually kind of nice. Like it kind of detracts from the Texas kind of conspiracy I was just talking about. Because I would assume, like we always talk about, like Notre Dame starting off super high and falling off. Texas had some very strong teams over those years. Like there were some years they probably deserved to start number 1, and years they certainly finished number 1. So yeah, it's really shocking.
So you could make the case that if Texas does start number 1 after being picked to win the SEC in year 2 in the conference, that this could be the most hyped Texas season ever. And chalk means that anything but living up to that would be considered a disappointment. That's kind of wild. But, and this is the good news for the non-Texas fans who are listening to this, of which there are many, the media has only predicted the correct SEC championship winner 10 out of 33 times, which is a batting average of like 303.
And it's nuts because Alabama, it feels like, has won the SEC like 70% of our lives, being generous. So like it feels like if you just voted Alabama every year, you would do better than that.
2016 to 2022, just Bama.
Just Bama. If you just voted Bama every year, you would have a perfect batting average.
No, you wouldn't have. No, you wouldn't have had a perfect batting average. You're forgetting 2019 LSU, 2017 Georgia. I'm saying if you would, they were the pick every single year.
Got you. Yeah.
So like that's the challenge of it. is that they're even in that stretch wherein everybody just said, all right, screw it, Bama. Pencil them in. We're not going to have 2015 with Auburn all over again. Even that, you still get bit. It's just, it's tricky. It's a bit tricky to predict. Makes me feel slightly better about my LSU pick. That that track record is so bad. So who knows? If chalk plays out, Will, your playoff locks from the SEC, Texas, Georgia, Bama. Maybe you disagree with this, especially after the way that last year played out with how much parity there was within the conference. I just don't see the SEC having two playoff teams, only two playoff teams. So that's why we're going to make the top three finishers locks. Is that fair? Okay. The question will turn to the teams immediately after them. LSU and South Carolina are at 4 and 5 respectively. Go figure that both of them they're the bookends of Clemson season. The way that plays out.
Yeah, that's really interesting for them. Hey, can't say they don't play nobody this year. I got to give them that credit.
This is true, Will. This is true. I would guess that the fourth place team from the SEC is either 5 and 3 in conference play or 6 and 2 in conference play. Remember, order of finish is just strictly based on how you finish with your conference record. It's not factoring in non-conference stuff. So there's some room for interpretation there. At the very least, those two teams could be fighting for their playoff lives late into the season. But so much of that conversation is going to depend on what happens with a team like Clemson, who I just mentioned could start off as the number one team in the country this year, and it wouldn't necessarily be a stunner, even though I would disagree with it. I just thought of how red Brian Kelly's face would be if we got him on Selection Sunday morning. And it's an interview with Marty Smith. He's pouring sweat. Brian Kelly is just sweating out pounds of liquid out of his body. And you see the angst on his face. The world needs that. It does, man. It
that would
really
be the
does.
Perfect Marty Smith mission to make Brian Kelly look relatable in that moment. He's like the perfect guy for it. He's like, well, coach, feel like you're sweating there. And BK is just like, there's a bleep every other word. He's just like, I'm sweating.
Marty's looking at him like, coach, you're getting sweat on my Jordans over here.
Do you want to use a lifeline, coach? I don't think you should be this wet right now.
Oh gosh. Look, we have so rarely gotten those moments though. You know, during the playoff era, I thought we were going to get so many more of those coach that just is truly on pins and needles, 50-50. We've had a few. We've had a few here and there. Certainly a couple of years ago with the Florida State Bama thing, all that.
That's the one, right? Because I remember at the time seeing Michigan's reaction to Bama and thinking like, oh, they're scared of Bama. And I remember FSU's reaction was just so, gut-wrenching. Me as a guy who doesn't care about Florida State, I felt bad for them. But I think that's kind of the only moment of like real high drama that I can remember.
2014, TCU and Baylor.
Oh, that was a wild one. Yeah, that was
Ohio State off the Big Ten championship. Yeah, but there have just been so few of those, and we're going to get more of those in the expanded playoff era. Maybe that begins with certain Brian Kelly, and we got him last year too. To be fair, the SMU thing, and is SMU going to get left out after losing the ACC championship, or are they going to make a decision to put in a 9-3 SEC team? So we did get a little bit of drama, but Brian Kelly, knowing what's on the line this year, knowing what his public perception is going to be if LSU is considered borderline, obviously that would make for a huge national story. So what the media is basically giving us with these chalk picks is that Georgia and Bama would be in. They would be in the playoff. That aligns with the FanDuel odds. UGA is minus 280 to make it. Bama's minus 184. LSU is slight plus money at plus 132. If Georgia reaches another SEC championship, which Georgia is predicted to finish second in the conference, that would be the 8th time in 9 years. I think we're going to have to start putting more side by side of Kirby's decade next to Saban's. Not to say that Kirby is better than Saban, okay? I fully acknowledge here that when Saban retired and Kirby closed with a 1-5 record against Saban, I said, guys, I don't think Kirby can do anything to catch Saban. Okay. I think that is gone, but I do think getting there to the SEC championship 8 of 9 times and staring at a 9th consecutive top 7 finish at least puts things into perspective when you remember that Saban's longest streak of top 7 finishes was 8 seasons. So I would just like it to just give Kirby that respect if he does indeed get there. And I know SEC West apologists, y'all had a tougher road, and it was tougher for Saban to get there year after year, and Kirby got to deal with the SEC East for all those years. I get it. We are beyond that era now. it would be darn impressive. It would be really, really impressive in this 16-team conference.
I would argue that after watching, a Georgia player pick up my future husband-winning quarterback like a tissue paper, I didn't really see this level of non-parity east to west. Whenever I saw that in person, I went, that team probably could beat anyone right now, and they did. So
this is true. Also, Georgia reaching Atlanta would once again probably mean that Kirby Smart was right about a quarterback. Probably right about Gunnar Stockton. If that plays out. The only time that Kirby was ever blatantly wrong about a quarterback evaluation with a guy that he said, you are my starter, I'm kind of banking on you. DeJuan Mathis, 2020, benched in the season opener against Arkansas. He wasn't ever expected to be the starter. Shout out Jamie Newman, the JT Daniels thing. We know how that went. And then Stetson Bennett, who was originally going to be the four-string guy, he comes in and performs well enough to be able to win that game and at least make Georgia competitive. But that was the lone time during this now 9-year stretch in which we'd be talking about Georgia failing to get to an SEC championship. So that's why I say that. If Gunnar Stockton is at least above average and solid, then Georgia is going to have a favorable path to be able to navigate its way to Atlanta.
I need to remember, nail the qualifiers here, but would you not say he was wrong about Daniels?
Here's the thing. I don't know that he was blatantly wrong about JT Daniels because JT Daniels did not live up to the hype that he came in with as the 5-star guy that was the former Gatorade National Player of the Year, and he didn't ever materialize into a starring role at Georgia. And I mean, from a guy that he truly said, I am all in with you. I don't know that he was ever all in with JT Daniels because by the time that he was all in, he ends up getting hurt and he's got no real choice but to turn to Stetson Bennett in those moments. And then he says, you know what, I'm riding with Stetson Bennett. And look, I mean, there are a lot of people that are listening to this going, Connor, you're an idiot. Jake Fromm, Justin Fields happened. I'm saying that he still was not blatantly wrong about trusting Jake Fromm to be able to kind of keep their head above water and get to an SEC championship, which Jake Fromm did that all 3 years that he was at Georgia. And I just mean from that standpoint of being like blatant swing and a miss. Obviously, I would have rather had college Justin Fields as opposed to college Jake Fromm. Okay, not denying that. Gosh, I'm gonna get ripped for that.
See, I feel like we are to a degree talking to the people who are yelling at their car stereos right now because we did definitely talk about all this at the time. And I mean, just to quickly rehash that and put a bow on it. You don't bench the guy who takes your team to a national championship the way that Fromm did, right? So yeah, that makes sense. That's the only reason I would push back about Daniels is the Clemson game. I feel like that game was rough. I feel like that was kind of to me, I was like,
elite Clemson defense was, and because Georgia wins that game, we don't have the JT Daniels conversation. You're right. Fair point. Okay. I'll stand by your skepticism of JT Daniels. Probably could include him in that category, but if Gunnar Stockton is this guy, which it's been a while since there's been this kind of divide about a Georgia quarterback with internal feelings versus external feelings. You don't hear a lot of people nationally banging the drum for Gunnar Stockton in the same way that Georgia seems to be internally dating back to when Carson Beck went down. More interesting than even Georgia is a Bama team who would be on the outside looking in at an SEC championship. Bama hasn't had a 2-year stretch in which it has missed the SEC championship since 2010, 2011, but it was also still able to win a national title during 2011. We don't need to go back down that road for your sake. And it was in the midst of 3 of 4.
Unnecessary. All this is unnecessary.
Look, context. We're here to provide context. That's what we do. Bama, if it finishes 3rd, which is chalk, would likely be 6-2 in SEC play, and I'm assuming a 4-0 mark in non-conference play because despite what one Kurt Signetti might have said, Bama scheduling like an SEC team meant playing 2 power conference foes in non-conference play to be able to get 10 power conference foes for the year, but I digress.
That guy's going to make you hate Indiana football, isn't he? I see it coming a mile away. You're alma mater. That is just this plunky, scrappy team that was so fun to root for last year. He's just going to keep talking, what's it called? Factually inaccurate crap about the SEC. And you're just going to be like, all right, dude, we gotta kill this.
Can't be the guy to be saying, Google me.
Yep.
and we do what to top 25 teams.
And we Google you and it's all fraud.
When you bail on Virginia.
Yeah.
Just saying. Can't. Doesn't work like that. 10-2 is the baseline for Kalen DeBoer. That's the baseline. Anything less, significant disappointment because of what a 3-loss season would mean and all of the interpretation that would come from those losses if that occurred again in the regular season. And I would still argue that a 9-3 Bama team that makes it into the playoff this year, that has quote unquote better losses, I would still argue that would be considered a disappointment because you're going to be traveling for a playoff game if you're 9-3, very likely. And that would be a really tough spot to be because you'd also be sweating it out. And that's not a place that Bama fans would like to be. They are used to being comfortably playing for a national championship. And a year like that would not necessarily, be the case.
Let's talk about that really quick. Going back to our Bama Standard conversation, right? So I hate that I'm once again carrying water for the University of Alabama, but here we go. Let's just say that, like not mid-career smoking dudes, Nick Saban, not like the 3-4 Nick Saban, but like the one that we kind of got used to over the next couple of years, win a national championship here and there, like, 11-win guy, lock it in, right? Like not dynasty, but like that. If you just took that Nick Saban and put him in the modern SEC, divisionless, new teams, Texas and Oklahoma, but Oklahoma beat Alabama last year. They just wouldn't have played them in conference, just devil's advocate, right? Before that. I mean, would that change the Bama standard? Like if nothing changed but the teams, what would be the Bama standard under Nick Saban, you think?
Getting to an SEC championship, being one of the 2 favorites to win a national championship. That's the standard. That would not, you could tell me, you know what? They wouldn't have had this offensive coordinator figured out. Would Saban have found a quarterback? Would he have been in this spot with Ty Simpson? The standard still would have been Saban. And I still would have banked on that.
We're talking about 10-2 is almost not like a best case, but like a very good case. But under Saban, that was kind of a worst case.
Correct.
So we have taken a step back, kind of regardless of the teams.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. It'd be weird if we didn't. I definitely think that's the case. So anything more than 10-2, I think we can agree that if your Saban-like 11-1 regular season happened, I think Kalen DeBoer is gaining supporters instead of losing them. 10-2 Bama probably means that, just as we talked about with Gunnar Stockton, Ty Simpson probably looks the part. You get a 10-2 with the schedule that they have, you're not floundering. You're probably not. Doesn't mean that he's en route to a top 6 finish in the Heisman Trophy voting, like each of the last 4 Bama starting quarterbacks were at some point during their Bama career. And again, that's excluding Jalen Hurts, who didn't do that until he got to Oklahoma. But it means that Ty Simpson is holding up his end of the bargain, and he's not necessarily being a bust as a former 5-star guy, and we're not necessarily turning to Austin Mack. Maybe that can happen, but I would not necessarily bank on that if that's the path that this Bama season follows.
True.
If South Carolina finishes 5th in the SEC, Lenore Sellers is going to be one of the 3 most popular players in the sport. He'll be in Heisman conversations. He will be in way too early first-round discussions. He will stay in way too early first-round discussions. He'll be the subject of some sort of lazy first-take debate on why he's the second coming of Cam Newton, which will result in me projectile vomiting all over my television or phone or wherever I see this crap, and I will expense a new one to the college football gods who gave us this script.
Fair. We have an ethos here. We have rules.
Yep. For what it's worth, I want this to happen. I want this to happen badly. With all due respect to guys like Drew Aller, Carson Beck, and like to a certain extent, even Nuss, who I like watching him sling it. I really do. There are certain guys like Kevin Jennings. Okay.
Who is this list of? I can't wait to see what this is about.
Considered elite quarterbacks, but their elite play when they're going, oh man, they're really feeling it. It is much more fun to watch Lenore Sellers at his best than those guys at their best. That would be my point. It provides me much more entertainment and much more moments where I'm sitting on my couch and I leap or I talk at Lauren about something that he just did and go, how in the world did he make that play? How are they moving the chains because of what Lenore Sellers just did? That scenario plays out if South Carolina finishes 5th in the SEC. It means probably 9-3 overall or 8-4 with some sort of late season playoff buzz. That's what's on the table if this South Carolina team, and specifically Lenora Sellers, lives up to expectations.
Yes. And I will say too, man, I don't know, I kind of said this in the Media Days pod, but I do feel like people are getting a little bit too high on South Carolina just based
I
on
do
what
too.
just based on what they bring back. And I hate to say they're setting up Lenore Sellers to fail, but I feel like he would have to basically win the Heisman for them to finish here. I think that he would have to have so much of the offensive load, and I'm not kidding here, or we finally see like the real version of like Nick Harbor or something. Like somebody has to show up that we just really can't account for here, because if you look at what they had last year, kind of like we talked about, not to rehash that, but it's like there was a lot of talent on that roster that we didn't really understand, and you could say that for the last couple of years in South Carolina, to be honest. So I get that maybe it's like, well, we'll find money again, we'll find a way, we'll make it. There's some guys you don't even know in this roster that we like our guys. Maybe that'll happen again, because it has the last couple of years. I get it, but really what I'm worried about is more of like the structural stuff, like offensive line, penalties, things that South Carolina has just not been really known for. And now they have the expectation, which, like we talked about last year, they were the underdog team. So yeah, I mean, it would take a, dare I say, literally Cam Newton-esque season for them to be this. So I'm actually very excited and I hate it for Lenoris because he's such a cool guy and I don't think he's cocky at all. But so much of that expectation is going to be put directly on him because he's like the only member of the offense that the casual fan knows.
Correct. And there's definitely a part of me that feels like my fellow media members have not taken into account what they lost on defense and what is still a really, really difficult schedule. And I say this as someone, look, we've had Shane Beamer on the show a bunch of times. I've gotten to know Shane a little bit during his time at South Carolina, and I feel like I am someone who defends him. And the defense of that preseason slot at number 5 is, well, at this time last year, we weren't really talking about Kyle Kennard, and that guy went on to win the Nagurski Award. Yeah, we were talking about Dylan Stewart here and there as like this 5-star who could pop. We weren't talking about him taking on triple teams and getting the quarterbacks in the SEC. We weren't talking about all this defensive talent that they were going to have, and instead we were kind of going, so they're really all in on Lenore Sellers, huh? Is he really going to be the guy? Like, is 4-8 possible? Those were the conversations then. So if they have the most important position in the game figured out, there is maybe more of a growing sense of Shane Beamer will figure it out. And that's
maybe so.
That's the counterpoint to this. If Florida finishes sixth in the SEC, as Chalk says, it's still a bit chaotic. It is. I'll do I've been a little bit too late on this. Chaos scenarios. We'll do that at some point over the course of the next month and a half before the start of the season. You have my word here. I was thinking about just doing every single record for Florida and illustrating why it's a chaos scenario. I think it is. I really do. 6th in the SEC is probably 5-3 in conference play. We don't know the non-conference play mark, which could be anywhere from 2-2 to 4-0, because again, Florida doesn't schedule like SEC teams. Kurt Signetti actually plays 10 power conference teams and not just 9. But whatever. So let's split the difference and say that 5-3 in conference play is possible for a team that's picked to finish 6th in the SEC and 3-1 in non-conference play. That's an 8-4 season. Lagway in an 8-4 season is getting Heisman love. He's staying healthy more than anything else, with all due respect to Harrison Bailey, Aiden Warner, the Yale transfer. Not sure if you heard that, but he's living up to the hype if that is how it plays out. And by the way, him not getting preseason third team love is actually a sign that maybe there's a little bit less hype, because that went to Arch instead, even though Lagway is the one that's got 3 times as many starts as Arch.
Yep.
And Lagway has never lost a game that he has started and finished, not to get into the quarterback wins stat, which is highly overrated. But I do think that is worth noting. And I think it's worth noting, if Arch had a vote, he would put Lagway ahead of himself, probably in the preseason, at least with what we've seen so far. It's not to say it's going to finish out that way, but we don't need to dig into that. 8-4 is Billy keeping his job. And here's the important thing. It's setting up monstrous expectations for a pre-draft DJ Lagway in 2026, wherein Florida fans could be talking about not just making it to the playoff for the first time, but a little bit like last year with Ole Miss, where we were talking about, oh man, now the schedule breaks much better. And look at this. Look at the pre-draft quarterback that you're going to have. And you're going to make the playoff for the first time. And hey, you might even get some people that are picking you to win a national championship. We'll get to Jordan Rodgers in a minute here.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made that Florida's schedule could get easier when they make the playoff, to your point, because with those early rounds, especially if you're not like a bye team, it's like, hey, they feel like it's like the guy at the end of the movie who's like, conquered Mordor or whatever. He's got like the arrows sticking at him. That's 8-4 Florida. Like, it doesn't really matter at that point which games you win and lose, because that schedule is so hard that it's like, okay, and like that's one thing I almost want to put on the list of things we don't say is, it depends which ones you lose and which ones you win and how you. It's like that's just a given, right? But with Florida, they almost have a schedule where you go 8-4, you're a team nobody wants to see in the playoff, and that's the best thing to be.
I don't think they would get there if they were 8-4. I really don't think that. And my guy Kelly Ford, who does all these breakdowns, really really good strength of schedule breakdowns for college football nerds that like getting into this stuff, and he does these models of what your record could be, and you should be considered a playoff team. And Florida's always the team that they could make the playoff at 8-4. I think it'd be a tougher thing to sell given the conversations that we've been having about SEC teams that lose 3 and 4 games. I think the selection committee, based on what we've seen so far, despite what the outside world would suggest, is probably not going to sign themselves up to put an 8-4 SEC team into the college football playoff. As difficult as that schedule projects to be. But for next year and for going into 2026, feeling like, hey, we don't have a coach on the hot seat. We're in playoff conversations. We might have the best player returning in college football. That's on the table if just 8-4 plays out, Lagway stays healthy and looks the part, which is crazy.
Yeah. And the objective is like at saying tongue in cheek, objective survive for this year. Don't lose momentum is basically what it is.
Correct.
And maybe in this case, I guess I do need to say it does matter which teams you beat, because they could have several top 5 wins. Just depending on how the season like plays out at different points of the season. And obviously, FSU not doing them any favors anymore. But point being, like I think that they basically there would be a team that is very respected at the end of the year if they get to 8-4, no matter what, and they could have a chance for the Brian Kelly Bowl Game special where they just play a team that is completely listless and doesn't care, and they just smoke them, kind of like they did last year. And so, point being, like this is a year that it would be hard to have bad vibes unless things go upside down, Lagway gets hurt because of the expectation with the schedule.
Correct. The chalk prediction is Lagway staying healthy.
Yep.
And maybe there are people that. I didn't, and you don't get a full breakdown of what each media ballot looks like, but I would love to know the lowest that Florida was predicted to finish. Was there anybody that had Florida in the double digits and had them at like 11th or 12th or something? And it's basically, we don't root for injuries. We try not to predict injuries, but there was someone that said, man, I would kind of like to get out ahead of this, and I can see the bottom falling out. It wouldn't surprise me if that were at least on the mind of a few media members.
Yes, and really, really quick, I think the best way to illustrate this is, okay, if you go from top to bottom of this list, because everybody's getting paid like tens of millions of dollars, and they all have these expectations. Obviously, Texas would be happy with number 1. I think Georgia would be happy with number 2, a chance, right, to play Texas. Bama, I think at this point, maybe they would be happy with 3, but after last year, they'd take it.
The baseline, yeah.
Yeah, the baseline. I think then you start to see, okay, LSU's kind of furious. South Carolina, fine. Florida is stoked. And like that's the highest the team is that is stoked. Like it's like if things play out just like this, they're fired up. So
yeah, because if you're looking, that is definitely the cutoff. Because at 7th, I really don't think that at 7th, Ole Miss is feeling giddy. And maybe there could be good moments within that, but I don't think Ole Miss is treating a 7th place finish like, oh man, look what we did. And everybody else that's below that, you would make the case, man, really disappointing season. And also because that's usually about when you start getting into the 4-4 in conference play category, not really having the late season playoff life. I know that there are some exceptions to that. A&M last year, the way that the season played out. And I understand that there could be, teams that are in a different sort of category based on who they beat and if they have those big time wins. But I would agree with your cutoff point there. So if Billy is keeping his job with chalk playing out, these guys are not. Kentucky finishing 15th in the SEC. That's curtains on the Stoops era.
Get ready to learn distillery, buddy.
He knows distillery. Maybe he pick up another hobby. I don't know. We'll see. $37 million buyout. It would be trending on a weekly basis. We'll see if Stoops is motivated after what's been just a brutal 10 months. You have my vow that if Kentucky overcomes that early on, and if this is kind of shaping up to be one of those years for Kentucky, we will have Zach Calzada on the pod during the season. I will have no choice but to ask him if he blacked out 2021 Bama game.
Mm-hmm.
That's my vow to you. We have already put the wheels in motion. If that sort of Kentucky season is in place, I can promise you. Who else gets fired if chalk is upcoming? Sam Pittman. He's not surviving if Arkansas finishes 14th in the SEC. No, there's no scenario in which that plays out and he's keeping his job. That does, however, Will open up the ever intriguing possibility that a certain Robert Patrick Petrino could find his way to an interim title and perhaps show the college football world that he is ready to take it by storm once again and that he deserves another head coaching opportunity, perhaps in the job that he is filling in for. We don't know. 14th in the SEC.
I hear the sound of a Harley Davidson starting right now.
Do you think he's gotten on a Harley since then? No way.
No
way.
No.
That's come on. If you're willingly getting on a Harley after that happens, I'm sorry.
That was a Jimmy Sexton call. It's like, I'm going to save you from this one, but you better drive that into a lake.
Please don't. Actually, please don't.
Like,
no
just
more Harley injuries. Yeah, just park it somewhere and just run away. Treat it like one of those scooters. What are they called? The bikes that you can get on?
Scooters, yeah.
Yeah, just like that. 14th in the SEC would be tough to forecast. Would be tough to forecast a scenario in which Robert Patrick Petrino ends up being the hero. That's the only issue with it, though, because if you were to get the interim job in mid-November, Arkansas ends the season at LSU, at Texas, home against Mizzou. All those teams won at least 9 games last year. Pretty tough to parlay that into an opportunity. But at the same time, as good as I would be to see Pittman go out like that, I, again, so much respect for Sam Pittman and, have loved having him on, every year that he's been in that job, and would really feel like, dang, that's one of the most likable people that is in college football. It's a shame that, it didn't work out even longer for him. But man, the conversations about Petrino, that'd be just a shot of life. Like a Tuesday, mid-November. Hey, what are we talking about today? We're talking Petrino, baby. Okay, well, if Auburn finishes 11th, I believe Hugh Freeze is probably also gone. Probably. Not 100% certain that he's gone, but probably gone. It's most likely a 3-5 mark in SEC play. 7-5 overall at best, which could mean a lot of different things. 7-5 is just room for interpretation all over the place. I don't think a decision on Freeze's future will come after the regular season. I think it's coming before that. They're not going to be like, hey, this all comes down to the Iron Bowl and you win, you're still here, you lose, you're gone. I think the hay's going to be in the barn before then with Hugh Freeze, the way that these Auburn conversations typically like to ramp up. A 3-3 start overall would have Auburn all but eliminated from the playoff discussion by early October. That feels very realistic within that 11th place projection, and here's why. That is the danger for Hugh Freeze with a very front-loaded schedule. In those first 6 games, if you don't have Auburn's schedule pulled up in front of you, don't worry, I've got it right here. First 6 games, at Baylor, that's a coin flip. Against Ball State, win. Against South Alabama, that's a win because Gio Lopez transferred to North Carolina. At Oklahoma, chalk says Oklahoma's going to finish better than Auburn, and that's a road game for Auburn. So, at A&M, another team, chalk says will finish ahead of Auburn, and then home against Georgia, who, by the way, has won that game 8 consecutive times. If Freeze is 4-2 to start off, that is not chalk. Auburn fans should be ecstatic if he is 4-2 to start off this season. 3-3 is technically chalk here because Auburn, I think as it currently stands on FanDuel, 1.5 point favorite at Baylor. So that's what you're talking about here. And I don't think we have lines for at Oklahoma, at A&M, and home against Georgia, but I'm assuming that Auburn would be an underdog in all 3 of those games. Not to get ahead of ourselves here, Will. But screw it. That's what this entire podcast is today. We're literally getting ahead of ourselves.
We are ahead of ourselves, yeah.
Way ahead of ourselves. We're talking December storylines. November 8th, First Bank Stadium, Nashville, Tennessee. Close your eyes. You can picture the cranes in the background.
Oh, man.
Tractors, some operating, some not. Some probably haven't been in use in about 4 months. They've lost the keys to be able to start this tractor. It's basically just a part of the stadium at this point. What are the odds that Diego Pavia delivers the dagger, the nail in the coffin to the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn?
Once again, that's mythology. That's perfect. I mean, this is the guy that, and we joked about it. Somebody said, "What do you have against the people of Alabama?" Because he's like undefeated against the state of Alabama, been beating Auburn since, I mean, COVID years almost. That would be a perfect mission for Diego Pavia to leave his mark on the
Beating
SEC.
Freeze since COVID years, beating Auburn 23 and 24, but beating Freeze for the first time in 22.
You're so right. Yeah. So like he's been doing that, for a long time. So yeah, point being, like, that would be his mission. If he could do that, in addition to already the money in the bank of Alabama, he would be an SEC legend right there. I think he would just change the course of the conference.
And by the way, chalk for Diego Pavia and Vandy means Diego Pavia and Vandy probably not going to be heard about as much. So I realize that. I realize that. But if that happened and Auburn is looking at its 5th loss of the season and it's coming at Vandy, it would be reminiscent of Ty Story delivering the dagger to Chad Morris. It would be not exactly the same because Hugh Freeze, for whatever reason, didn't make the decision to add Diego Pavia to his team, even though he could several times over. But it would be one of the more memorable exit games. And I think we would know it at the time if it played out that way.
Again, we talked a ton about, the Bama standard and the follow-up. One thing that I feel like goes very under the radar is the Auburn standard. And listen, guys, I moved to Hoover, Alabama during, here's what it sounds like when you move to Alabama in the middle of the 2000s, right? People just come talk to you like door-to-door pastors and try to get you to pick a side, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Auburn stuff was so convincing. It was like, look, we're going for the thumb. That was the 5th win in the row against Alabama. We have all, it has been so long since Auburn was that dominant that their coach is now a senator, right? Like, it's so crazy to think that the world that I grew up in, that we kind of fell in love with college football in, Auburn was the more competent team. And even when Bama rose up under Saban, Auburn was right there. They're the only team that could beat Saban on a kind of a semi-consistent basis under Malzahn. And the way that they have just taken several steps down every couple of years, they've done it almost, I hate to say they've done it quietly because they've done it loudly, but when you look at where they started and where they are now, we're going, 7-5. I mean, maybe if you win the right 7 games, that was completely unheard of when we were coming up, because Auburn had these great athletes that they were able to recruit, from the Southeast. They were able to lock down parts of Georgia. They were able to go up and down the coast and get guys. And they were such a sturdy team under Gus Malzahn because they had such talent on the lines. Nobody talks about how big and strong and scary Auburn used to be. And now, I look at this team and I'm just like, they're not scaring anybody. And that was the thing that Auburn was, scary. You didn't want to go into Jordan Hare. You didn't want to see these lines. You didn't want to see these freaky players they had that they were just finding out of nowhere. And now I'm just like, what is there to be scared of? Even a guy like Hunter is gone. I know that Cam Coleman's like that. I know they've had some guys like that, but it's just so weird to think how we've just quietly put Auburn in the closet.
Did anyone ever convince you with the door-to-door sales pitch of Auburn or Alabama to pick an allegiance, or did you every single time that person showed up, the solicitor that did not pay attention to the no soliciting sign that was sitting outside of your home, did every single time you slam the door and go, I'm an LSU fan?
Well, you got to pick a side within the state. I always picked Auburn because they were a lot more similar to LSU. They were a lot more fun to root for. Their fans were really warm. I loved going there. I saw the Cam Newton game live, and I was like, these fans are so cool. They're being nice to me. I told you I saw Cam Newton on a scooter. So I had a really soft spot in my heart for Auburn growing up because of that. Their fans just welcomed me immediately, whereas it felt like, Saban had just gone to Bama. They were getting back to where it's kind of we told you so the whole time. So, yeah, I want this team to succeed a lot, to be honest.
How are there that many solar panel salespeople on this earth? I wonder. You've got me thinking about. Why do all of them have to start off every conversation at my door the same exact way, where they're laughing at a joke that I've not been a part of, and they act like we're mid-conversation already? They comment on something on my shirt. They try and shake my hand. It's the same thing every time. This can't work on people at this point. They should know that I've seen this 1,000 times over. I would take gladly someone pitching an Iron Bowl sales pitch to me and just giving me the basic facts. Here's why you should come on board for Alabama. Here's why you should come on board for Auburn. I would sit there and listen for 20 minutes. I can't listen to a solar panel pitch for more than 2 seconds at this point, and I could spot it from a mile away, and I'm sick of it. I can't stand it anymore. It's the worst.
That's such a good comp because, like I said, the iconography I talked about. Oh, we're going for the thumb. What's the thumb? I don't know what the thumb is. Who's the thumb? Oh, it's the fifth. And so it's like,
You're
yeah,
like protecting your thumb. You're like, don't go for my
don't
thumb.
take
You
over
weirdo.
my thumb. I'll be on your side, bro. And so point being, like, yeah, you kind of get transported to this world when you move to Alabama. So it was a pretty fun experience. I hope they get back there, man.
Oklahoma at 10.
Oh man,
That's also probably 3-5 in SEC play, 4-4 at best.
John Mateer is a zombie at that point. He's missing it hard.
Here's what I want to. There's a lot of different ways you can go with that.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about a 7-5 or an 8-4 season overall if that happens. I think Venables has a decent chance of staying with that. I think he does because it's still considered an improvement when they had a losing season last year. You're not going into the bowl game. You know, you're already going to have a decision made by that point, but you're not facing once again, hey, you just had your third losing season in 4 years. I think that would matter to a certain extent. My guess is that John Mateer would be a good, not great quarterback. Maybe he's in and out of the lineup dealing with injuries and whatnot. That could play out. That type of season in Norman still probably has Brent Venables' future as a big question mark. And there's probably a whole lot of room for interpretation with the types of victories, the types of losses that he's having, and especially knowing that AD Joe Castiglione is retiring this school year. Again, follow that situation. That's going to be really important for how we talk about Venables and whether or not he's going to get a year 5. I think the earlier a replacement is hired for Castiglione, the worse it is for Venables. If they've got that locked down in October or something like that, and they're operating with that sense of urgency, it would be really tough for Venables to stomach a disappointing season wherein playoff consideration is not really a thing, and they're suffering these blowout losses. And again, they're thinking, how in the world is South Carolina coming into Norman and winning this game by the midway point of the first quarter? You can't have another year like that when you're going to have a new boss. It would be funny if Joe Castiglione was present in those interviews for his successor. And there's, you know, the OU board of trustees in there, and they go through all these questions. It's some 4-hour interview, these types of things that you hear about all the time. And at the very end, Castiglione just casually throws in there, oh, and if you accept the job, you have to keep Brent Venables for year 5 because I don't want that blood on my hands. Do you just say, nope, I can't take this job?
You know, I think you do. I think you just ride with it. Yeah, you just ride. Because the thing about Oklahoma, Sunshine Pupper King over here, they have enough like success in enough sports where I feel like it's like, I'll just pretend like football's not happening for a year. No, it's not my fault. And then I get a free, oh, you already put me in the hole, whatever, you know?
It would also be kind of nice if you're coming in there as an AD, knowing that you've got a coach that's really trying to win you over. And instead of the other way around where I don't want to assume that I know the back end conversations that Greg Byrne had with Nick Saban when Greg Byrne first got that job as Alabama's AD. But I can guarantee you there was not a single part of Nick Saban that thought to himself, I need this guy to like me. It was the other way around. That power dynamic,
built, son.
It's already
built. All right, you can't take that down. This isn't Iraq. You can't get a rope around that and pull up.
This is true. This is true. That dynamic would be just fascinating to follow. So chalk would mean that you would have 2 no-doubter coaching changes with Stoops and Pittman, with the possibility for a third or even a fourth, which is why I unofficially set that over-under of SEC coaching changes at 2.5.
Really quick, going back to Oklahoma, I will say this. That reality is kind of easier for me to see because all it takes is regression to the mean in both directions, right? Where the offense is not the most putrid offense we've ever seen, but this team felt at times to be immune to momentum in a way that we're used to seeing teams kind of just crumble. They just never crumble. I know we talked about that a little bit, but this is a better way to say it in a productive way, which is that there were so many points in that season that they should have just cracked and watched the bottom fall out and like had like a 4-win season, and they just never did because of the defensive leadership like we've talked about. Well, if you lose 10-15% of that and you get 20% better on offense, you're the same team, you know, because at the end of the day, they were in games that they had no business being in. You look at the Alabama game and go, why are you guys like this? How do you believe you can beat Alabama at this point in this season? It's pretty wild what they were able to do last year. So I think just losing some of that defensive leadership could do that to them, even if the offense can't be worse than it was last year. We've said it ad nauseum, but I think it's easier for me to see because I feel like the defense is harder to replicate from last year than, the offense is almost.
One of the toughest things for a defensive-minded coach to overcome, talking to you, Will Muschamp, is when you have an obvious area of need and you just don't have the solution for it.
Mm-hmm.
That hangs over you. And if you're the guy that is just not able to figure out this quarterback situation, which I'm a John Matier skeptic, and I still sign off on the logic that was used to bring him into Norman. I still think that Brent Venables went about this the right way, and I totally applaud that. But if you are considered to be the guy that is just always coming up short in that very key area, it wears on you, and it impacts public perception. So you're right. If you are 15 to 20% better, which OU fans are going, wait a minute, only 15 to 20% better on offense is not good enough. That's what are you talking about? We need to be like 90% better on offense, and then we can at least get back to respectability. But you're right. That will be part of the 7-5 interpretation for Venables, depending on how it plays out in those very key areas of need. So, which look, I wanted to also dig into a little bit of the preseason all SEC stuff, not as much because order finish is more fascinating. I don't think that your preseason all SEC ballot is predicting how it's going to play out. I don't like to base it on that. I like to base it on what I've already seen from you in 2024, who I think you're going to be if you step onto a field tomorrow, which is heavily weighted on what you have done on an actual football field the last time we saw you. But so we'll get to that in a second here. But my biggest deviations from chalk in terms of order of finish, and I'm curious if you know these for yourself off the top of your head. I didn't tell you to come prepared with these, so feel free if you got to look these up. That's perfectly fine too. I had LSU finishing first, not fourth. I had South Carolina finishing 8th, not 5th. I had Mizzou finishing 9th, not 12th. People need to look more at that Mizzou schedule. I'm going to keep saying that until I'm just blue in the face. Everybody else was within 2 spots of chalk, though, for me. Like Ole Miss, I had Ole Miss 5th. They were predicted to finish 7th. A&M, I had 6th. They were predicted to finish 8th. Nothing crazy outside of those. So those were kind of, and I always kind of, I feel like I put a lot of time into this, and I'm going to have my full crystal ball. We're going to start the crystal ball series. I think the plan is August 6th, I want to say, where SaturdayDownSouth.com, I go through each SEC team, every single game that an SEC team plays. I'll have that, the breakdown, all that stuff. Something that I like doing each and every year because it kind of forces me to decide how I feel about a team instead of just saying, oh, this team's got sneaky playoff buzz. You can only get away with that for so many teams. And then you realize, oh, this team that I said had sneaky playoff buzz, I predicted them to finish 11th or 12th in the SEC. Maybe I don't think they have sneaky playoff buzz.
Connor, hold on. We haven't talked about Mizzou yet. I think you're right on the money here. This is the first, we talked about an empty calories 10-win team in the SEC, which had almost never happened before. And it happened last year with Mizzou. And everybody said they won all these games, but they were disappointing. And looking at this schedule, it feels like it got easier. How did they do this? And why are they predicted so low? I feel like this is free
People
money.
aren't looking at Mizzou's schedule. People aren't looking at Mizzou's schedule. Even when Eli Drinkowitz is addressing how easy their schedule is, relatively speaking, because they don't have a road game until week 8.
I was about to say October 11th. Yes, sorry. Yeah. That's no. That's Bama. October 18th at Auburn. Yes.
No teams that won 10 games last year. 1 game in a non-bordering state. It's favorable, man.
Dude, their road games are at Auburn. Again, back in the day, at Auburn was a death sentence. Probably not anymore. At Vandy, don't want to count them out, but it still is Vandy. At Oklahoma, again.
All their road games are against teams that lost at least 6 games last year.
Yeah, and then they finished the year at Arkansas, and they'll be playing for something, and Arkansas just might not be. Again, we hope Arkansas does well, but that rivalry's always been weird. We know that. That rivalry's always been weird. I'm not taking that out of there, but there's not a stretch of death. There's not really 2 hard games in a row here. Even if you have a stinker, you could just come back if you're drink.
I don't think Mizzou is going to be the 9th best team in the SEC based on if you just line them up and play it on a neutral site. But this is where you have to factor in strength of schedule. This is where you have to look at stuff like that and realize there is a whole lot of variance between what a team like Mizzou has and what a team like Florida has.
Yeah.
You have to account for that. You just do.
And they logically couldn't play each other like they often used to because that would negate both of their schedules, one being evil and one being easy.
Yeah. Was there anything that came out with the preseason all SEC or preseason order of finish that you found you were just in a totally different place with a team specifically?
I think we hit on it. I love the Mizzou note. I think Texas is too high. I personally think LSU is a little bit low, but again, I get it.
Did you have Georgia winning the SEC?
Yeah, I had Georgia, and I actually had Georgia, Alabama, and then LSU. I feel like Texas is going to take a step back, and even again, I know scheduling, all that. I know that they were an imperfect team last year, But like, there's just too much on the line with those next three teams, I think, especially Georgia having beaten them so consistently last year. Alabama, like, they're getting to the point of like they would just have a blood sacrifice if they could keep those jobs. It's like, it's after last year. So like, I get Texas has already done something and they feel good about themselves. And that's just not how the SEC ever works, you know? And I'm not saying that they're lazy or anything, but it's like they still haven't really gotten that welcome to the SEC moment outside of the Georgia games where it's like, no, dude, like this is a little bit different.
And last year against Georgia was welcome to the SEC moment.
But that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like they were still able, like there were a lot of games last year that they kind of, I hate to see, got lucky in, but they were like struggling against teams that were just in a bad spot. You look at the Florida game, you look at like some of these other games.
No, Florida game they blew them out. But
not the Florida game. Sorry, the who's the other Arkansas? Duh, sorry. The Arkansas game, the Mississippi State game was close for no reason. So like they just like didn't look like the team that they were until they kind of needed to in the postseason. And against Georgia, they didn't. So I feel like that team wasn't quite as good as we thought last year. I gave them a lot of credit for how they were able to respond to all the injuries, but those guys just aren't. You know, some guys have stayed on the roster, obviously, but I feel like the guys that I loved, some of the receivers, I think Arch is going to be a little bit better in the aggregate than you were. It's not going to go there right now, but I just think that Texas is going to take a little bit of a step back. So yeah, I like Ole Miss a little bit more than a lot of people. I think Florida is going to be a little bit lower, but not worse, to your point. So, yeah, that's my overall takeaway.
Yeah, like Ole Miss, Mizzou, and Tennessee are three teams that I feel like people have not taken into full account their schedules and have instead just looked at some of the bigger picture questions about them, which is totally fair. Definitely fair. I fully understand that. But I think if once they sit down and do the win-loss, the game-by-game stuff, they'll realize, oh, man, they very realistically have a much more clear path to 9 wins than I probably gave them credit for. And that's you have to take that into account. You just do with the order of finish stuff. It's different. It's a different conversation than preseason rankings and all of that stuff, which, again, I will say until I am down to my last breath. If you're factoring in strength of schedule with preseason rankings – and not preseason order of finish, you are doing it wrong. You are doing it incorrectly. But as for where we're trying to predict these teams to finish, that's entirely different.
Really quick, let me clean this up. Of course, I picked the one game they didn't struggle in. During the month around the Florida game, they struggled. They lost to Georgia. They had a close game against Vandy, and they had a close game against Arkansas. They smoked Florida. That was the game that I pulled out of that month for some reason, but there was a point there.
I knew what you were trying to say. You just picked the wrong game to say it.
Picked the wrong game to say it. That's often my problem, yeah.
A few other gripes. Preseason all SEC. Besides the Arch thing, I already talked about that. We talked about why I think Pavia should have been there. I had Lagway as my third guy. I would have had Pavia as my fourth. And I'll rip through these. Jaden Baugh not being one of the 6 running backs to earn preseason all SEC honors is pretty laughable when you look at the side by side of he and Nate Frazier, Jam Miller, better in like basically every category, even the advanced yards after first contact, missed tackles forced, all that stuff. Caden Lee not earning preseason all SEC nod, bizarre. That guy had more catches and receiving yards than Ryan Williams last year, and nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about it.
There.
Say it again.
And he was there.
Like, and he was there.
Physically there. Like, yeah.
One of 3 SEC receivers who was there. 0 running backs. 3 SEC receivers that were there, and yet still Caden Lee didn't get that love. And Ryan Wingo, who, look, I think if we talk about Texas and this offensive potential, there's a lot to like with a guy like Ryan Wingo, who could easily finish there by season's end. I get that.
But you're talking potential. Exactly. Whereas like Lee's done it in this offense.
Ryan Wingo didn't finish in the top 50 last year in receiving yards against SEC competition. Did not finish in the top 50. Probably shouldn't be a preseason all SEC guy, but whatever. R. Mason Thomas, the only returning all SEC defensive lineman. 9 guys earned that honor last year. He is the only one of that group of 9 that is coming back. And yet he wasn't voted a preseason first team guy. Like, what are we doing? That doesn't make any sense. And nobody remembers this stuff. Nobody remembers preseason all SEC. Players probably, put it in their back pocket, bulletin board material, fuel going into fall camp, whatever the case may be. That's fine. I do think it does set some expectations. And what I love from doing this exercise and, kind of knowing where I stand on guys and teams specifically, even if chalk plays out this year, Will, this exercise shows you we're still in for a lot of entertainment. And that's the beauty of college football.
All SEC first team. Who is your lock to stay there by the end of the year, and who is your guy is most likely to fall off?
Jake Slaughter is the lock to stay there. Jake Slaughter, if he doesn't finish first team all SEC, I'll be stunned. That is my number one. I would put him even ahead of Ryan Williams. Yeah. I think there's
Interesting.
too much variance. As we saw post Georgia, there can be a lot of variance to his game, and if Bama's just rotating through quarterbacks and stuff like that, then it's a little bit tougher to see that path for a receiver. But Jake Slaughter, I don't see that guy all of a sudden getting worse at football.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't.
Yeah.
So he'd be my best bet to finish there on the offensive side for sure. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
maybe overall because with defensive linemen and stuff like that, like sacks get taken into account. Defensive side, Anthony Hill Jr. would be my guy for that as
Mm-hmm.
the safest bet. Would you go in a different direction?
I personally think, remember I was talking about PR with offensive linemen. I always talk about this with Caden Proctor. I think that Parker Brailsford has just a lot of PR, with the transfer and everything. So I would be, if Bama has a good year, I could see him getting that love. But yeah, I think in terms of like guys that are, I think Stowers is hard to move off the first team just based on what he did last year. Guy that wasn't there like we talked about, but I just based on the tight ends we got, and again, we talked to a couple of them, just a little bit more old school guys outside of him who just feels like a physical freak and feels like at Vandy, like just there's going to be that connection. If everything else breaks down, assuming everybody's healthy, that's going to be just fine. I think he's pretty recession proof.
Only tough part is if Vandy's 4-8, and if
Mhm.
Vandy becomes an afterthought, and one of these young tight ends emerges, Oscar Delp kind of lives up to it or something like that. You've only got that one spot for that.
Mhm.
So that makes it a little bit tougher as opposed to somebody like Jake Slaughter, who's in theory competing for 5 spots on the offensive line. So but I get what you're saying. I mean, Eli Stowers is preseason first team All-American, and he's got this rapport with Pavia that's several years in the making. He'd be a stunning guy to watch just fall off the face of the earth with how much he's been relied on.
Yeah, and on defense, I think obviously every position on defense is like loaded. I think Michael Taft is another guy that like has a lot of name recognition. He's there with Texas, got a lot of recognition. People are going to be watching them. Gonna have to pick another Texas guy, which is pretty funny. Like the Texas guys I like a lot. Colin Simmons, I think, given that he already got that buzz as a freshman, and I know that position is like really like rotating door and it changes every year. I get that. But just the way he popped as a freshman, he's going to be seeing more double teams. Obviously, a little bit less talent overall, but I mean, they got a ton of talent on defense. So yeah, I like Colin Simmons a ton.
Sean Alexander, true freshman of the year in college football. Guy who didn't technically start,
Mm-hmm.
and they've just got so much talent in the front seven. Yeah, the only skepticism I have with those edge rushers is, do people just end up looking too much at sacks, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
they can get scrutinized really easily. Dylan Stewart also being in that camp, preseason first team though, makes a ton of sense. Like they'd be crazy not to. And there's even a case to be made that if their production falls off, which look could be the script that we see play out this year, that they could also still have a first team argument at season's end if we're able to look beyond just sacks. How are they impacting the game? Are they, I don't necessarily get too into the weeds with pass rush win rate,
Mm-hmm.
but there are definitely different metrics that could show you that they're impacting a game and impacting what an offense would like to be able to do a lot more than maybe just sacks. So.
And I think the two followers real quick. I think Cam Coleman, obvious choice, just because like the production is just gonna be hard to see at Auburn. I think he's the best or second best, or probably the second best receiver in the SEC overall. I just think, like you said, Auburn, if they have a rough year, they're going to be a lot of receivers. Like, we're going to find a guy like Caden Lee in this list at the end of the year, assuming he stays healthy. So you got to find spaces for the other guys that are going to be risers. I think he just finishes like second team. I just think that that's how that works. And then like same convo with Dylan Stewart we already had, where it's just like a little bit smaller of a guy that everybody's going to be focused on. It's just going to be hard for me to see him in the first team in that loaded position.
Surprised also, Centurion Perkins wasn't a first team guy. Preseason All-American love and not a first-team guy. I love CJ Allen, but CJ Allen as a preseason first-team guy ahead of Centurion Perkins, I was like, not quite on board with that just yet. But it is always interesting to kind of compare these the preseason versus the postseason, what it looks like, how much variance there is, and all of this stuff. For college football nerds like us that like breaking down expectations, who's able to rise above them and stuff like that. It is something that I feel like is something that I like to follow and track throughout the season. All right. Anything else before we kick to Jordan Rodgers? Anything that you wanted to squeeze in there? We didn't get into your breakdown of LSU not having more than one preseason first team guy.
Oh, I'm so fired up about this. Every time, like we talk about expectations being the enemy, I think that's been the case for Brian Kelly at every step of his career. So fired up. LSU has finished to pick fourth. We've seen what happened in 2023 when they were finished, or they were projected to do great things. Please keep sleeping on them. On the other side, I think, like I said, Texas has the bullseye in their back. It's going to be great theater to see how they handle that.
Love it. All right, let's get to Jordan Rodgers. Always enjoy chatting with him at SEC Media Days. Our annual tradition, a little peel behind the onion for the people here. I text him usually a week or two before Media Days. It goes into a void, and I know that he's never going to answer it because he's got like 1,000 unread texts. And then he finds me at Media Days some point, usually on Monday. And then, he always says, hey, whenever you need, however long you need, whatever, we'll make it happen. So we made it happen once again. So here is Jordan Rodgers. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. The interview that I look forward to as much as any in the year. It is Jordan Rodgers. It is Jordan Rodgers. I got to say this. We talked about this the other day. I said for a long time, you are my second favorite Vandy quarterback because as a Bears fan, Jay Cutler. You are now ahead of Jay. The bad news is you're behind Diego.
I get it. I'd put me behind Diego too. Dude is made for cameras. He's gonna come steal my job at some point.
At what point this offseason did you decide I'm going to put Diego Pavia ahead of Arch Manning in my quarterback rankings and just cause a stir so that I can go on Get Up and just talk about it on every platform?
I mean, I thought about it consciously. There is some sense of morality to me, so I couldn't. But I was close. Every now and then in this business, sometimes you got to do something for a headline.
Wait a minute. So you have Arch 5th.
Yes.
Does that mean you have Diego 6th?
No.
7th?
No.
8th?
No.
Am I going in the wrong direction?
Well, think about the guys we're talking about. No. So, I can't remember I think I remember the order. But after 5, I got Taylon Green, Ty Simpson, Marcel Reed. Who am I forgetting?
John Mateer.
I have Mateer at 4. So my top 5 is Nuss, DJ, Lenoris, Mateer, Arch.
Why? So do you have Diego in your top 10?
I don't think he's top 10 on the list, honestly.
Is this a prank? Am I are we? Camera's going to come out? And
no, think about this. So the thing about rankings is you get caught in between projection and evaluation. And if you evaluate Diego, there's not many guys that did more with less. There's not many guys that did more on the biggest of stages. But when I project what this is going to look like next year, like where he's going to fall in this mix, there's just guys that I think have a little more upside and a little higher ceiling to what they're going to be. Now, does that mean I think he's going to go out there and stink? No, absolutely not. I think he's one of the hardest guys to game plan against. But I do think by merit of what we saw last year, they're going to run him a lot less. So I think his production is going to be a little bit lower on that, right? And they should because they need to protect him. He was banged up at the end of last year, and he wasn't playing like the same Diego because of that. So that's just that ground caught between what I think he's going to look like and what I evaluate. There's a lot of guys that I'm really high on their ceilings and their intangibles. Don't mean that to be a slight because I think it's one of the deepest quarterback classes we've ever seen in the SEC.
How did you not tell me this before Monday so I could have gone directly to Diego and said, former Vandy quarterback Jordan Rodgers doesn't have Diego as a top 10 quarterback in the SEC?
Well, I don't think. See, again, those names I was throwing out, I can't remember if I even ordered them specifically. A lot of those guys I'm just lumping together. But, I would lump those guys just ahead of Diego.
I'm stunned. I truly am. I thought we were going to have a conversation
Where'd
about
you have him at?
I have Diego as my number 5 quarterback in the SEC. I have him one spot behind Arch. And I point to the exact thing that you brought up. He's banged up down the stretch after Deion Walker fell on his leg. Who among us could survive such a thing?
Big man.
Yeah, confirmed. And I am a believer that what Diego returns offensively with what he showed last year with Tim Beck, he will still have all the tools in place to do the things he did last year and maybe actually be able to stretch the field a little bit. And if he can do that, that's absolutely he was an all-SEC quarterback last year.
Here's my concern. I think as the year went on, the offense got figured out a little bit. Down the stretch, they had one game with over 300 total yards. Now, I know they're not a team that runs a ton of plays, so it's not like they need to go 400 yards. But I think they struggled a little bit down the stretch because teams started to figure out how to scheme this kind of modern triple option type thing that they want to do, and because Diego was banged up. But part of this ranking too, and I'd throw the question back on you. Part of what I do in my head as an exercise is I'm doing this, and I'm going, okay, if I had an SEC team, not any specific, an SEC team, who am I drafting? And so that's where I think that's part of the evaluation and projection aspect of it. And that's where the uniqueness of what they do makes it harder to kind of project and draft and where you'd want him. So, yeah.
I do the exact same thing. That is entirely how I base preseason quarterback rankings. I think you have to a certain extent. Where I have a little bit more of a problem with is the John Mateer element. Because so much of what he did is unknown. And it's very unique to see a guy come into this conference and take over. And I brought this set up before. I'll bring it up again. Diego Pavia is the first quarterback to go directly from an FBS school into the SEC to earn all SEC honors at season's end. Yeah. Cam Newton had the season in between. Jarrett Stidham had the season in between. John Mateer, can he do that? Does he have that kind of upside? Because by putting him at 4, I would assume you're all in on him.
Yeah, I really liked him. That was the most fun. Again, that's not a technical evaluation, but the most fun I had watching film. And the reason I put him where I did, because I think more than most of the quarterbacks, he's got an innate and elite ability to create something out of nothing. And a lot of times when you watch the film, it's kind of what he was doing. I love his ability to change arm angles. Sometimes he's throwing submarine. What I loved also, and he doesn't have like a DJ Lagway arm or a Garrett Nussmeier arm. He's got a really good arm. I loved his ability to manipulate the trajectory of the football on the deep throws. And Oklahoma could not complete a deep throw to save their life last year. And he's just got a knack for it. It's not that he's throwing it, where we practice, it's 35 yards on the red line, 5 yards from the sideline. Like, it's different every single time, but he's got a knack for being accurate no matter what kind of subtly changes with coverage, with where he's at. So I just think that translates. And obviously the Diego Pavia effect of bringing your offensive coordinator bodes really well. But the struggle I had was knowing the talent that he's going against and the talent I'm watching on film. But then I go, yeah, but he's also – the guys he's throwing to weren't great either. And he's going to be throwing to some guys that are a little more talented, at least as a whole. So I really like Mateer. Yeah, I'm high on him.
I know you had a few of the Jackson Arnold games last year. I've said this ad nauseum throughout the offseason, so I don't want to repeat myself. When you watch his game, do you see a broken quarterback, or do you see a guy that can emerge and get Auburn to the places that it hopes it would like to go, which is just simply not the SEC basement?
I see both. I think
that's terrifying, by the way.
Yes, that's Auburn, by the way. I mean, look at the relationship they had with Bo. It's always a little. I think a lot of blame should be on Jackson Arnold for some of what he did last year. A lot more blame should be on everything else. And everybody knows they didn't have their receivers. The offensive line was banged up and rotating. They could not run the football. This was an RPO-based offense. The first letter is R because that means running, rush. They couldn't run the football. And so when you can't do that, what is a quarterback to do? Like, the decisions now are so gray that he's supposed to make in this RPO scheme. I thought because they probably realized his confidence wasn't where it was and they were trying to simplify things, they took a lot of the protection off of his plate. The protection was a disaster. I mean, how many times did we flip on the tape and they're blocking defensive ends with tight ends? Like, it just because they didn't want him adjusting that. This system and the talent that he has and what Hugh wants from him, I think, is better suited. I think he needed a hard reset. Do I think all of a sudden he's this wildly confident guy that's going to rip it up? No. I think he needs to still build that up. I think if he has a bad couple early games, then you got to worry about that confidence going in the tank again. But if he gets on a run, he's suited to be really elite in the mesh RPO aspect of what they want to do and from a decision-making standpoint. If Auburn can run the football, take some stress off him, he can be a guy that can get them to 9 wins.
Have you ever been in a situation like that, and you're just at any level of football, where you were realizing that you just might be screwed? The circumstances around you just might be as bad as they can possibly be, and there's just nothing maybe within your power. At least you're not mentally prepared to be that guy in that power who could just overcome everything, and you just are like, I'm in an unwinnable situation.
Yeah, I don't know if unwinnable, but to kind of what he dealt with, just like having doubt as a quarterback, you can't play. Like if you walk to the line of scrimmage before the snap and you have doubt in any aspect of what you're doing, you're not going to execute at any level. My junior year at Vandy, we had really good linemen. And one of my boys, Wes Johnson, was our left tackle, but his weight to hit every week was 263. And he would chug a gallon of water to try to weigh in at 263. My right tackle, Andrew Bridges, was a converted tight end that weighed 255 pounds. So I started to get beat up a little bit. And so I didn't have faith that I was going to have the time to sit in the pocket. And so I started to see ghosts. I started to leave the pocket when I probably shouldn't have because I'm looking at the rush. I'm worried. So those things affect you, and they're hard to shake. They're really hard to shake. I probably didn't shake that until that next year, my senior year, when I started to have a little more confidence that I could control things and take my eyes and stress away from what was happening in front of me.
I almost let you say a positive thing about James Franklin, but I just can't do that.
Someone asked me earlier about James. I said, like, the amount of fire and passion was at a psychotic level his first year. Rightfully so. First year as a head coach, Vandy, like, we needed it. But man, he's mature. He's a different head coach now. But it was some crazy times. He was on fire. I mean, it was fun times.
I went to an Irish Games thing in Dublin, and I kid you not, the instructor at this Irish Games thing was like, oh yeah, we had this Penn State came through. Penn State played their season opener 2014. It's James Franklin's first ever game. They had a team event at this Irish Games thing where they're doing like curling and crap like that. He's like, that head coach, I think his name was, I don't remember if he named him. I'm like, James Franklin. He's like, that guy is nuts. We were doing this little team activity, and he's all worried about everybody and whether or not they're going to get hurt. He's like, I'd never seen anything like it before. You saw this every single day with James Franklin.
Yeah, honestly, in a way, that aspect and the fire, the psychotic energy at times was really driven from the competitive nature, though. So I will say, to say a good thing, like that got that out of us. That's why we were able to go from 2-10 to 9-4, like because of that. But yeah.
Is Gunnar Stockton a dude, or is he just another guy?
I hold the dude ranking very high on my rankings, so I don't know if he's a dude. I think he's a little overlooked about how talented he can be. And I think if you go back and watch that Notre Dame game, he played well enough to win. They couldn't block anybody. The receivers were atrocious. Like, he made throws under pressure that I didn't think he was capable of making, honestly. Didn't know if he could. So I think he's a lot better than maybe people think, even though I don't think anybody thinks he's a bad quarterback. But I don't think he needs to be a dude in this offense. Carson Beck needed to be a dude last year because they couldn't run the football, and there was drop back and throw it and play hero ball from quarterback. Stockton, because of what he can do with his legs, because the running back room's going to be healthier, because of adding Noah Thompson and Zechariah Branch to the pieces they already have, this is the best wide receivers. I know they had Brock Bowers. They've had in a long time. I've been critical. I made news so much because I've talked about how average this group has been for so long, and I stand by that. I think they're going to be better this year, much better around him. So I don't think he's going to feel like he needs to play hero ball, and he doesn't need to. So I don't think he's a dude, but I think he's good. I think his floor is like, or his ceiling is like a really good SEC quarterback, which I think they can win the national championship as. They don't need a hero.
You picked Ole Miss to win it all last year, didn't you?
Oh, come on. Yes, I did. I picked Jackson to win the Heisman and Ole Miss to win it all. I still don't feel bad about that. Like, they just shit the bed when they shouldn't have.
Who among us? We've all been there before. Some of us don't do it against Kentucky. We have all the respect in the world for Kentucky.
But I will say, Brock Vandegrift, come on.
I'll tell you what.
I'd retire after winning that game, too. I'm going to retire week 3 or whatever it was. Don't wait till the end of the year. Just, like, hang it up. Like,
I wasn't all in on Brock Vandegrift, but I met him in person last February.
Great kid.
Awesome dude. The physical build, he's one of those guys that when you see him in person, you're going to become more impressed with everything about him. And you kind of see the humble, down to earth type of guy that he is. And you kind of are like, all right, this could be a thing. We could be talking about this. I couldn't have foreseen it going so horribly. As a quarterback who gets like reps those first times, is there a moment, do you think, that it probably hit for him or for somebody that is going to experience it this year that we're talking about right now at Media Days, where is it like game 2 or game 3 where they're realizing like it's just not going to happen for me?
Yeah, the thing, it stood out to me when I started to observe his arm strength or the lack of it in person. I think that was the biggest detriment to him because Kentucky is always a team that wants to run the football, play action, take shots. the underthrows, the inability to push the ball to the perimeter and downfield is that you can't be in that offense or be successful in that offense like that. They're not a spread you out quick game. He could do that because you don't need a big arm to do that, and he's smart. That was just the limitation that I think was a bad fit for Kentucky.
Have you had a chance to watch Bo Perbula yet?
I have. And I tell you what, that is the biggest wild card to me because when you watch the tape, you can't see anything. Not once did I think he had a drop back pass. Actually, at the end of Wisconsin, he threw a seam route for a touchdown to kind of rub it in, even though we're way up. That was like the only drop back pass that he had all year. So every time he was in, it was gimmicky because he was kind of that change up running quarterback. So he's got a ton of physical talent. I think his arm is good, but I have no freaking clue because you don't see him in a situation and you go, oh, that's what it could look like at Missouri. You have no idea.
4 passes longer than 20 yards.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I wouldn't even have guessed it was 4. And I watched every snap he had.
Completed one of them.
Yeah, the touchdown in Wisconsin when they were up 42-10 or whatever it was.
Like that's what I always want to know with a guy like that. How is he so coveted in the portal? Like that sounds like I'm not trying to discount Bo Perbula, who was such a talk of college football in December and was somebody that everybody's going like, this guy just doesn't have, like this guy is just a victim of the system and everything like that. But he only made that decision because of how coveted he was. Yeah. And there was clearly an evaluation where they said, we don't care that you attempted 4 passes beyond 20 yards. You're going to come be a guy, and we think that we can build an offense around you. Like, you evaluate quarterbacks all the time. What do you think those teams in Mizzou and Wisconsin looked at and said, we're all in with that guy?
I will say scouting departments and coaches are not above star chasing. And I think, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but your evaluation in high school and where you chose to go carries weight. And so they go, oh, this guy went to Penn State. He had a ton of offers. Like, he's got to be super talented. And you watch film, you're like, I don't really know. But he was obviously talented enough to go there out of high school or to have the accolades. And so I just think there's a little bit, and there's also a little bit of panic. Like, I think when you go after a guy that's at least coveted, you go, well, at least everybody thought he was going to be good. You go after a guy that maybe no one really wants, you take its flyer on him, and he ends up not being good. Now it's all on you. You go grab someone out of the portal like, well, I mean, he was at Penn State. Like, we got the best, we got one of the best guys in the portal. He just didn't work out. It at least insulates you a little bit from that decision. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the self-preservation mode of this NIL era. You want to get somebody that splashes because you think they're good or you hope they're going to be good. The fan base is excited. They're happy. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least it wasn't, oh, you chose the completely wrong guy when you could have had this guy.
Plus, he was quarterback for James Franklin. Quarterbacks for James Franklin, they get all sorts of opportunities.
Honestly, that offense is still kind of tough to watch. And Tyler Warren's a dude, and he was a dude, but
we got a mic on the loose. Well, we're adjusting. We got it. We're
troubleshooting.
We're troubleshooting. This is how it's done. This is pro stuff right here.
So we still rolling?
We're still rolling.
We're still part, to me, it's about even evaluating Drew Aller. So the physical skills are there, but the offense is just still kind of gimmicky. It's so like scheme guy open, like he never really has to work through a full progression. It's tough to evaluate a guy even with that much talent, and Perbula obviously as well because he already played in that system and it was gimmicky. But yeah, I was in that system. I wish we would have. I wish RPOs were a thing when I would play in college. That'd have been great. That would have been my wheelhouse. Shorter quarterback, like just let me read it and rip.
I wish you could have played for Joe Moorhead.
That would have been great. Moorhead. That would have been awesome. And he changed. Actually, that was a great move by Franklin when he picked him up because they needed to change things up with that system that Franklin had brought from Maryland to Vandy to Penn State that got kind of stale in the first few years. What's Moorhead doing now? He's coaching somewhere.
Coaching at Akron. Right. I talked to him 2 weeks ago. His son just committed. Where did his son just commit? It was like Kent State or something like that.
Yeah, that's why you flashed my timeline.
Last one for you. National champion, Heisman. You can't pick Ole Miss.
Well, I'm not going to pick Ole Miss this year. LSU. I feel more confident about Nussmeier's the Heisman than I do saying LSU's going to win a national championship. They're my favorite to make a deep playoff run because I just think that the weapons he has are stupid. Like adding Nick Anderson, I think it was huge because they have so much speed. They needed a big body X that they could just put to the boundary and dictate coverage and then attack with speed to the field. Like that was a perfect marriage. Barryon Brown, talking Kentucky, He was underutilized for years. He's a guy that's so much better than I think what people think because he didn't have a quarterback that could throw him the football. And obviously Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, Trey Green is a monster. Bauer Sharp, actually, I think is better than people think. So that offense is going to be ridiculous. If their defense is just good, if the money they spent at defensive end and on the front helps them be good, average, good, not great, like they're going to be tough to beat.
I have LSU winning a national championship. Did you steal my take?
No, I didn't. Actually, I didn't know that. See, I feel like are they going to win the national championship? They're my pick for now. I'm gonna stick with it. Nuss is going to win the Heisman. Nuss is going to win the Heisman.
Surely this will go better than last time.
Yeah, dude, I've been bad. Man, every year you got some that just, Joe Burrow. Is he still playing?
Joe Burrow?
Yeah.
At LSU?
No, I just mean did he make it in the NFL?
He is. I've been watching the quarterback show on Netflix.
Some guy ranked him like 9th in the SEC like a number of years ago, so I didn't know if he'd make it.
I think I gave you crap for that too. You deserved it.
Oh, absolutely, I deserved it. Yeah. I tried to follow my sword on that one. I tried to go down with the ship. Didn't work.
Better predictions this year. Jordan Rodgers. This is just two people picking LSU to win a national championship. Love it.
All right, well, let's close out with some lad of the week. There's one that I definitely know that you're going to pick, but you've got multiple today. Why don't you start us off?
Mine's a little bit deeper. Can we go with yours first?
Okay, let's do it. Mine is not deep because it is a certain $76 million man getting a job. Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher joining ACC Network, decided that sitting on his ranches and watching college football is a little bit different than actually doing the in-studio stuff and being able to go to different campuses and whatnot. It is interesting to think about what Jimbo hopes the next 10 years of his life look like. It really is, just because of the unprecedented buyout and all those different things. But
and he lives in altered reality too. That's the thing about Jimbo. I don't know if he's ever really lived in real life, so he could be like president,
I think he belongs on ACC Network.
Oh, yeah.
I really think that ACC Network makes more sense for him than an SEC Network thing, as much as I could picture him being alongside Dari and Doring and doing, the SEC football final show, which is just teed up for former coaches. I used to love seeing Chiswick on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his breakdowns would be really good. But he also needs a translator. And nobody is better at translating Jimbo Fisher than our guy, EJ Manuel.
Mm-hmm.
So he needs somebody that's just right there with him the whole time. Like, all right, so here's actually what Jimbo said. We'll slow it down. Just like if you're listening to this on half speed, I'm going to say that's a you thing and not a me thing. I'm sorry. That was mean.
That would be a really great segment, is if they had Jimbo in EJ's ear and he was having to play like charades or Pictionary or something with what Jimbo says.
I would really like if they got a weekly film breakdown show.
Mm-hmm.
Sitting there just looking at ACC quarterbacks. I would watch that. ACC Network needs better original programming. Something like that would be really good. Mm-hmm. And I am fascinated to see the Jimbo spin zone, because I remember asking him, gosh, I think it was his first media days, his first SEC media days, 2018, when it was in Atlanta. And I believe I asked him, for years and years, you always said that the ACC has the most depth. Do you still think that? Just seeing where he would go with that question.
Good way, yeah.
And he Jimbo'd his way out of it and said, I think all the conferences, blah, blah, blah. In Jimbo fashion, he didn't really answer the question, but that's coming. And it's just where our industry is heading. The Dave Portnoy hire for Big Noon Kickoff is in direct response to what the SEC has mastered for years with having a Feinbaum. And there needs to be more of that cheerleader voice. Like, that is the direction that so many of these conferences are heading. And I think Jimbo's kind of going to be that in a way for the ACC. And we'll see what extent he's able to do it, if he's able to slow himself down talking on air in this role, because he last year would do off campus with Hester and EJ, and his spots were really good and really interesting on that. He still speaks like Jimbo, though. He's got to dial it back.
I think he needs like a morning show. I think Jimbo in the morning would be so electric. I think once we kind of get a little bit sleepy, a little bit eepy later in the day, like a final type show, I think is a little bit, would maybe slow him down, maybe make him easier to understand, right? But I think having like almost a Get Up style show. I know he's not going to do the prep at like 5 a.m. That's like, I know that's like the
EJ's on
graveyard
Get Up
shift.
now a lot though, so that maybe that's his in to Get Up is just going through EJ and just the two of them on the same side of the desk. I could see that.
But could you imagine just turning on your TV after like a run and just feeling like you're at an auction? That would be so fire.
It'd be great. It really would be. Can you imagine what Jimmy Sexton had to negotiate with ACC Network, ESPN execs, of which he's worked with many, of course. Yeah. But imagine working with those execs, sitting down and having to negotiate Jimbo's contract at ACC Network. Hey, your guy's got a $76 million buyout. We could pay him pennies here, and Jimbo's just is going to be just fine. Let's get him on air. Let's not worry about the contract. No, Jimmy Sexton still probably found a way to get Jimbo a 7-figure contract and another ranch or something like that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Jimbo on ACC Network this year.
Yeah, definitely, man. So I got two. This is a super emotional line of the week for me. I'm going to start with Tyrann Mathieu, who announced his retirement from football. Man, we talk about guys that have like really made us fall in love with football. I think that was kind of a transitional player that made me think like, oh, wow, I could actually have a career in this sport. Like, I love this so much, and I love watching kind of the breakdown of what he does on a play and trying to see where his head's at. And he would like make defense a spectacle. And I think that's so hard to do, especially in modern football. He wasn't ever really a guy that played dirty. It was a transitional era, right? We're kind of starting to get into the spread era, like in 2010, 2011, when he was playing at LSU, but he adjusted really well. He's a guy that got kicked off LSU for smoking synthetic weed. And it was seen as like, this guy's so small. He's got these off the field problems, which ended up being nothing. And what he turned into, after going late in the draft, or lose a third rounder to the Cardinals, was like, it was like from the time he stepped on the field, he was not just an impact player, but such a great leader. Like every locker room that he was in, people like kind of gravitated towards him. He did a lot of charity work in his hometown, New Orleans, obviously finishing his career for the Saints. Do say it doesn't really say a lot of great things about the Saints organization, that a son of New Orleans comes home, looks around at what they're doing and goes, I'd rather just hang out over there in the same city. I think I'd rather do that. But shout out to him, man. Those Tyrann Mathieu highlights up there with the Tavon Austin only one highlight to some of the greatest highlights ever. It's like if you show someone that and they don't really understand football, they think that's what football is. Him at LSU or even him in the NFL, where it's like, this guy can hit people. He can like return punts. He plays a little bit of like a weird offensive role, like a decoy. He plays special teams. He can like that pick he had against Florida. I can still imagine it now, where it's like one of the best tracked balls I've ever seen. So that guy was one of one.
The punt return in the SEC championship, so many electric plays. I told the story when we did our flag football draft, and I took him as my defensive player. In our college house in Bloomington, Indiana, with 5 dudes, Honey Badger don't care. Honey Badger don't care. That was the most popular thing that we would say. And he was probably our favorite guy to watch that season. That stretch in time, we watched Honey Badger and Cam on so many of those 3:30 CBS games and just had to. You had to. We would come home from a tailgate for a noon kickoff in Bloomington, wherein IU was playing against Western Kentucky or some crap, and nobody actually goes into the football game. We'd all take a nap, and then the drums would drop, and there's Honey Badger on CBS making some unbelievable play, and we're all just yelling at the TV. Those are some of my favorite memories of college that he was actually responsible for. And that's like no emotional, not an emotional connection to it the same way that you did, but was truly one of the most must-see defensive players of my lifetime, like bar none, and made me realize that you can have someone on that side of the ball, and obviously he did special team stuff too, but that you could have someone on that side of the ball that makes you want to watch him no matter what he's doing. And that's such a hard thing to do in football. Like, I think about how hard it is to stand out in that way. And man, Honey Badger did, and was just one of my favorite players, one of my favorite college players to ever watch.
And I'll say this too. I remember when they played, it was the Cotton Bowl against Ryan Tannehill before A&M joined the SEC. And I remember like that game aged like fine wine because Tannehill like obviously went on to get drafted high and have a long NFL career. And I remember he was wearing like number 14 back then, and he was a freshman. And I was like,
not 7 yet. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, who is this character? He's like this weird, like it almost looked like a helmet doesn't fit guy. Like, what is he doing out there? Why is he like? And he was just like destroying this game plan for like a pretty good A&M team. And then people forget they started the season against number 3 Oregon after Oregon had just played in the national, this is like peak Oregon. Like, they didn't have Michael James anymore, I don't think, but it was like that era with like Chip Kelly and all that. And he immediately popped against that team. I was actually randomly watching Oregon highlights from that era last night. Like, wow, this team looks so unstoppable. I was like, not against Tyrann Mathieu, man. Like, that was a team that just didn't run from anybody. They also played at West Virginia that year. They had another sick play against them. So, yeah, that was one of the harder schedules I've ever seen. And every game he found a way.
Hopefully that means that in this stage of his life, his retirement life, that he's back at LSU all the time. He's a fixture of the program. Is there any bad blood there? I don't really know that relationship. Like that whole thing's been, time has healed that wound, right?
I think that he is going to end up making a play for the LSU head coaching job. Maybe that's a conspiracy theory. I think that the way that he is like, he's giving a lot of money to the school. He's always there for the players. He's like that guy that's always kind of like around. And he's kind of like, every time there's been a little crisis, he's like, somebody needs to step up and do something. And like, I don't even think I'd hate that like later on, obviously, but I would love for him to get involved because that's part of what people said Brian Kelly couldn't do that I think he's done a great job at is getting kind of that heart and soul of Louisiana and bringing in the former players. And so, yeah, he's super happy for now, with LSU.
Didn't he make that $1 million donation for the new facilities that they got 2019 as well?
Yep.
I might have just totally blanked on that. If I'm not mistaken, it was either he or Pat P that made that big time donation.
He's made a couple of big ones for LSU too. Like I said, he's just always in the right places. Like he's just a good dude.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's got a good next phase in life ahead post football.
Yeah, man. All right. So I was putting this one off because it's emotional, but I saw this week really sad story for me, and this is like my overall lot of the week. My guy Chris Roberts from my fantasy football league, man, tragically passed away just days after his 40th birthday this week. He was with his family, his 2 kids and his wife, and just one of the most unique people I've ever met in my life. You know how every fantasy league has that guy who's like kind of a bleepster that's just always doing the trades and like always like trying to change the rule? Chris was that guy. And one couple quick stories about Chris, just because he's that type of guy. In college, I remember doing a project with him where he tried to pitch that like in one of our sports marketing classes, Orlando was going to make a pitch for an NFL team, and he was going to call them the Orlando Orcas, and he was going to keep live whales in the stadium. And I remember sitting there and being like, Chris, this is around like Blackfish era. I was like, Chris, we can't go present this to like the board at our college. Like, we are not going to have orcas in the stadium, bro. And like, I was sitting there going, he's like, no, dude, like it's no. And he was like a big time country dude, red voter. And I was like, no, dude, like there's going to be protests if you put orcas in an NFL stadium. He don't like the noise. And like, I was joking, like I would call him Orca Chris. He had a ton of different careers. He was a guy that did like the cleanup after like people actually like passed away and would do like the would like kind of like make houses like safe to live in again. There was a death in the house, and so he called himself the dead body guy. And the other thing that was wild about him is I don't know if I've seen this outside of Chris, he proposed a trade for an entire roster in fantasy football one year. He traded one roster for another roster and did better with my buddy's players than he did. It was one of the funniest things we've ever seen. It's just because he was going to mess with my buddy. They just kept adding players and adding teams. He was trying to do 3-team trades in fantasy. He was trying to do 4-team trades. He was trying to do like quarter point PPR. Like every offseason, my guy Chris was such a menace. And we would always joke about like, we would have to like unionize. He'd be like, Chris, you can't make kickers worth this much, whatever. And so that was one of my connections at college. I obviously met him in college and kind of that was like being an adult, being in those classes where we had to like have real life experience, and then staying in contact with him through the years and checking up on, oh man, you got married. That's super cool. You've been a great father. You've done all these cool things. And it was just really crazy to see his wife actually shared like a Facebook post. I knew he was going through kind of a battle, but he's a guy that always just kind of had health issues. He was like one of those guys who was like, oh, he'll bounce back. So hate to see that, man. Me and the boys are gutted. We've been donating to his GoFundMe and stuff and trying to get his widow some relief there. So it's crazy, man, just to see something like that happen to the boys. And we're all just going through it because he was just such a personality, and we're going to miss him a ton.
Last year, I talked about my cousin who died very unexpectedly, and who was like my second older brother growing up. Mm-hmm. He was that person in our fantasy football league. Mm-hmm. Wild trades all the time. Would call me talking about a start-sit thing for one of his 4 different teams, and he'd call me on a Thursday at 1:00 or something like that. And it was just the guy that took it so seriously. And as much as we all have this feeling in the moment with those people of, dang, like it's much. you also learn to appreciate them. And obviously it sucks when it takes tragic circumstances to realize like how much they actually meant. And one of the things that we did to honor him, because we felt like my brother's the commissioner of this league, this family fantasy football league that we do. And he said, we just got to do something to be able to honor him, to remember how important he was and how fun it was to have him as like a part of this league, even though he would pride himself on being a pain of it. And we had, a Bears jersey with his fantasy football name and his number that goes to the winner every single year. And so last year, Lauren went undefeated, and the jersey is in our closet right now. And it's such a cool thing to look at. Like, oh man, like we're honoring my cousin who, was a fixture in this fantasy football league and was one of the reasons we were able to kind of get it off the ground to begin with. And it's one of this like fun family tradition. So I'd say if you could find a way to kind of honor him that like pays respect to him within the league and to do it, it's kind of a cool way it might seem insignificant, but it for us, at least, it feels like such a cool way to kind of, allow his memory to live on every single season.
We actually, funny enough, my buddy brought this up the other day. He designed our trophy, which is like a WWE style fantasy belt because he's a big wrestling guy. And he kind of like led the charge on that. So it's kind of perfect because he won it, I think, 2 of the first 3 years. And then had like, that was when he was the most insane. That was when he did the full team trade and he was trading like Odell for like 6 guys or whatever. And so with a league like that, you just can't do like draft pick trading because he would just build a fortress of draft picks. But anyway, so that's the cool thing is like, I think we're going to give our pool probably to his family this year. And then we have the trophy, which is so awesome. But we will probably rename it like the Chris Roberts Memorial Trophy or something. But what a dude, man.
That's awesome. Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. That's a pod. That'll do it for today. We're going to be on 1 a week, at least until fall camp starts. I'll update people on the schedule, but that's going to be the plan moving forward. We're getting so close, guys. We're getting so close to 2 pods a week. Actually feeling like we're in season mode. I know media days, a little bit of a tease for the 2 pods a week. We're going to be getting back to it really, really soon. We're going to have a lot of fun stuff planned for the season. Please use that promo code SDS2 on Dabble. It's going to get you $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at SetDownSouth, at CJ Guerrero, at GoSoHard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.